Setting the stage for diplomacy, over 2 million Ukrainians have fled their homeland. Hundreds of civilians, including women and children, have been killed. As we move into the third week of the Russian assault on Ukraine, Turkey is leveraging its unique position and ties with both Moscow and Kiev to give diplomacy a chance. I'm Murat Aslan, and today's newsmaker is Turkey's push for diplomacy. It is the first high-level meeting bringing the foreign ministers of Russia and Ukraine face-to-face with each other. Let's keep circumspection about the outcome aside for a moment. Make no mistake, the messaging that lies in the optics of the meeting between the top diplomats of Russia and Ukraine is remarkable enough and incredibly vital. Diplomacy is the only way out. And Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who has leveraged his personal relationships with both Putin and Zelensky, sounded hopeful.
I hope that the meeting of the foreign ministers of Ukraine and Russia will open the door to a permanent ceasefire.
Well, Turkish diplomacy succeeded in what others could not do, actually bringing us together. It was the first meeting between the Ukrainian and Russian foreign ministers in years, and especially since the beginning of the conflict. So I saw the willingness of Minister Çavuşoğlu to do his best to arrange the next meeting, to continue this dialogue. And we did not discuss any timelines, but I saw this commitment, and I will be looking forward to a message from him. As I said, I came with two main objectives: to arrange a humanitarian corridor from the besieged city of Mariupol in eastern Ukraine. Thousands of civilians suffer there without water, without electricity, without food supplies. And second, my goal was to try to reach an agreement on the 24 hours humanitarian ceasefire across the entire combat zone. Today, Minister Lavrov said that in principle, he has nothing against humanitarian corridors. It's just not in his competence to decide on that. I was surprised to hear that, because my assumption is that foreign ministers are vested with powers to make decisions and to negotiate and make deals.
I think everyone knows well that President Putin never refuses to talk. But we do not want to have talks for the sake of having talks. We want to talk about certain agreements, to reach certain agreements. We also talked about that today with Dmytro Kuleba, because he mentioned the topic that he quoted, and I reminded him we always stood for talking and meeting. We really can get some added value.
In a nutshell, this meeting is the first meeting at the level of the foreign ministers after the start of the conflict. Of course, we cannot expect a miracle to come out of this meeting, but still, this meeting is really meaningful because the political contacts took place. And we have also spoken the possibility of convening a meeting at the leaders' level.
Joining me now to discuss this further from Prague is Turkish Ambassador to the Czech Republic, Mr. Egemen Bagis. Thank you very much, Mr. Bagis, for joining us here on the Newsmakers.
Thank you for having me.
Now, despite every effort by world leaders to try and mediate, it took President Erdogan's special relationships with Putin and Zelensky to finally get the foreign ministers of Russia and Ukraine to the negotiations table in Antalya. How significant a success is this, and can Russia and Ukraine carry forward this diplomacy?
Well, this is a very important and very successful endeavor on part of Turkish diplomacy. Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu and President Erdogan have been working on this for quite a while. And this is the highest level contact between the two parties since the start of the conflict. And it's the first time politicians at the level of foreign ministers are getting together in the same room and exchanging views. Of course, we are not optimistic for a miracle solution overnight, But the fact that they started a dialogue hopefully will lead to a solution in the long run. Because if both sides did not have the intention, they would not have come to Antalya to have this meeting. The fact that they got together is already a sign of hope for humanity. And Turkey is approaching this issue from a very humanitarian perspective. We just want the conflict to be over. We want to save lives. There's a saying in Turkish, if your neighbor's house is on fire and if you don't help them put it out, that fire might eventually burn your home as well. So we're trying to prevent the ongoing fire in our neighborhood. We have no interest in seeing these two great countries continue the conflict. The war does not help neither party, no matter who gets what at the end.
Okay.
It's not going to be worthwhile for what they have already lost. So the sooner we turn back into peace, into dialogue, into trade, into human dignity, the better for humanity.
Now, Mr. Bosch, like you say, this meeting between the Russian and the Ukrainian foreign minister shows that the intention to de-escalate tensions is there. Tell me, how likely is it for Turkey to turn that intention into a reality?
Well, Turkey is doing its best. Turkey is providing the platform. Turkey is considered to be a safe and trustable ally for both sides. And we're hoping at the end of the day, we can use our good relations both with Russia and with Ukraine to achieve peace, lasting settlement, a ceasefire, which is not going to be just for a day or two, but forever, hopefully. It's heartbreaking to see in this day and age the footage from Ukraine. It's really heartbreaking to see the results of the attacks, the buildings, the bridges, the airports, the nuclear facilities being attacked is not in the interest of anyone. And we are all in this together. We have to prevent this from going any further. We have to de-escalate the conflict. It should, all parties in the world, all global sides, should try to work for a peaceful solution.
Indeed. Now, another interesting outcome of this meeting was that it has raised the possibility of a face-to-face meeting between Presidents Zelensky and Putin. Tell me, Mr. Bosch, do you think if that meeting happens, it could possibly end the war?
Well, it takes two to tango. If both sides are willing to make a deal, then we should be able to achieve some results. But both sides have to be sincere, both sides have to be willing, and both sides have to be able. I hope a meeting at the level of presidents between President Putin and President Zelensky can also be conducted under the hospitality of President Erdogan very soon. Turkey is ready to provide the necessary conditions, platforms, hospitality. Turkey is known for hospitality. And as you know, both Russians and Ukrainians love to vacation in Turkey. They love to visit Turkey. Hopefully, their presidents can also achieve peace in Turkey.
All right. I know, Mr. Egemen Bagis, you were tight on his schedule, so thank you very much for taking out the time to talk to us here on the Newsmakers.
Thank you for having me.
Now, let's broaden out the discussion more. Let's go to our panel. Here with me in the studios is Murat Aslan. He's a faculty member at Zaim University and a researcher at the Turkish think tank, the SETA Foundation. He has previously had several high-level positions within Turkish NATO units. Also from Istanbul is Matthew Bryza. He's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center and a former U.S. ambassador to Azerbaijan. And completing our panel from Kiev is Peter Zalmayev. He is the director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative, a non-profit organization that aims to reinforce democratic institutions in post-Soviet countries. He also hosts a program on Ukrainian TV. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here on The Newsmakers. Murat, let me begin with you. No one was expecting this meeting to deliver a sort of miracle in terms of ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. But if you were to name the positive outcomes of today's meeting between the Russian and the Ukrainian foreign ministers, what would they be?
Well, it's a meeting at the level of foreign ministries. So yes, at least there is a type of communication between the parties, and it's a good thing. Second thing, in such cases, either you are committed to freeze the conflict or just open new channels. Well, there must be a type of empathy that addresses the psychology of each other. So in this case, I think there's no agreement at the end, though. Now, Lavrov will just deliver some messages to Putin, and the same issue will be valid for the Ukrainian side. So there may be a type of discussion in their HQs. So that's important. But we should not expect so much, because this is at least another aggression war against Ukraine, and the agendas are totally different. And we have to be, well, not pessimistic, but not too optimistic to assess such type of meetings.
Okay. Matthew, let me come to you. Now, the statements made by the Russian foreign ministers are very interesting. For example, he said along the lines that he does not have the mandate to make any decisions today. Why do you think Foreign Minister Lavrov came to Turkey? What was his motivation behind coming to this meeting?
Well, I think at one level there is a desire to please President Erdogan and Turkey and Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu. I think that the relationship between Turkey and Russia has always been a complex one throughout history, with Turkey fighting more wars against Russia than any other country if you go back to the Ottoman period. And so it's a history of confrontation and cooperation. So this is a big victory for Turkey, and maybe President Putin wanted to do something nice for Erdogan. But I think there's probably more to it than that. I think that Russian diplomacy at the highest level is probing here, is trying to see if there's any give on the Ukrainian side for Russia's maximalist demands, which, as Lavrov pointed out, are still on the table. Russia is demanding not only that Ukraine, as he horribly calls it, denazify and demilitarize and not join NATO, but he talked about Russia's extreme demands with regard to restructuring the entire European security system. So I think maybe this was just a probe in terms of Russian diplomacy, and maybe an attempt to kind of split the transatlantic community by looking as if it's Russia who's willing to come to the table, but the Americans and the other NATO allies keep the pressure turned on. So maybe he's looking for some relief as well from further sanctions.
Okay, Peter. Now, my producer had told me that in your pre-interview notes, you had said that this meeting was a useless one. Tell me why.
Well, I think it's window dressing by the Russians. Obviously, the Russian propaganda it claims that Russia is waging a defensive, not even war. They call it a special operation. The doublespeak there is truly Orwellian in its scope. And so to keep up this, in order to keep up this charade of Russia as the peacemaker in this conflict, they need to be seen as at least engaging in some sort of a peace talk. I do not believe that. I mean, Turkey's goodwill notwithstanding, and Turkey has a fine line to walk here, as it considers both countries close allies and very important trading partners for understandable reasons. The key to any sort of diplomatic solution, should it arrive at some point, is not in Ankara; it is in Beijing. China is, I believe, calling the shots here. For China to finally put its foot down and say enough is enough, that would probably end the conflict pretty quickly, considering that Russia is simply is at this point the most sanctioned country in the world's history. 5,500 sanctions have been slapped on Russia. It's increasingly isolated, and so China remains its sort of fallback plan. And so I believe that this is, and once again, what my colleagues have mentioned, just the rhetoric coming from the Russians. They have not budged one bit. They're still talking about some nebulous denazification, which is completely
okay.
ridiculous.
Peter, the rhetoric aside.
Sure. Yes.
the rhetoric
No,
aside, don't you think the fact that the foreign ministers of Russia and Ukraine met for the first time since Russia started attacking Ukraine is a positive sign, which could possibly pave the way for a diplomatic solution?
Eventually, there will have to be a diplomatic solution, simply because Russia does not have the capacity to keep waging this war endlessly. Russia's army is demoralized. It's poorly equipped. It's been exposed to all the world. It's been exposed to ridicule. It's a colossus on clay legs, as we say in Ukrainian. And so eventually there will have to be a diplomatic solution. I agree with Matt Bryza that Russians are kind of probing to see if they're softening, by which I mean indiscriminate shelling of Ukrainian cities and towns, if it has produced any results. But for now, I think before we see any true breakthrough, I mean, we may still a deepening of this Chechenization strategy that Russia is waging, which essentially means turning Ukrainian cities into rubble.
Murat, there's no doubt Turkey is in a very difficult position. It has good relations with both Russia and Ukraine. At the same time, Turkey has an opportunity to mediate peace and try to foster peace between these two countries. Number one, I would like you to respond to what Peter has to say. And number two, what more do you think Turkey can do at this point?
Well, mediation is something that both parties must accept it. Once any party says no, that means mediation ends. That's a clear rule, in international law, and delineated how it could be proceeded in the UN Charter. If you go to the Articles 27 and 39, it's very clear how to resolve a conflict. Well, Turkish mediation depends on the acceptance, the tolerance of both parties then. But in this case, now, they talked by the mediation of Çavuşoğlu, Foreign Minister of Turkey, but it's not a mission that is directly attributed to the initiative of Turkey, but Turkey was just a facilitator in this case. If they want mediation, then Çavuşoğlu should have or start a type of shuttle diplomacy between Ukraine and Russia. But there's something really important and challenging. In Ukraine, there is a war of aggression. So this diplomatic and political aspect that Turkey has to care must be enhanced by a reading in accordance with international law. It is an aggression war. So in this type of situation, it will be hard to mediate. For instance, if Çavuşoğlu goes to Kiev, well, under what conditions? There's a huge encirclement of the Russian forces. So the conditions must facilitate a mediation in Ukraine. Otherwise, well, parties will somehow be treated not in a fair manner, but with a discriminatory one. So I expect Turkey, at least, to further this effort. On the other hand, well, it's on Russia to facilitate this activity, facilitate this mediation, not the Ukrainian side.
Okay. Peter, let me come to you. It's clear that one side has to make concessions. What kind of concessions do you think are needed at this point to bring this war to an end?
Well, despite Ukraine's, convincing performance on the battlefield, which has taken the world by surprise, especially Western intelligence services and military experts who did not expect Ukrainians to mount such a fierce resistance and really discounted the idea of a national spirit as mattering in warfare. Even the biggest hawks in Ukraine still believe that yes, there will have to be some formula found, some compromise in order for this to unwind and for the conflict to end. But once again, coming back to Russia's demands, as they stand now, pretty much unchanged. This ridiculous idea of denazification and demilitarization really mean Ukraine's capitulation through other means. If Russians want Ukraine to be a neutral country, to forswear being a member of NATO in exchange for security, for ironclad security guarantees, that's one thing. I think there may be a compromise there. There may be Ukraine may be willing to go even a little further when it comes to Donbass and Crimea, short of signing off on their transfer to Russia, but sort of just freezing this topic for some time. Once again, Zelensky is also, I think, negotiating from a very tricky position, simply because, as Ukrainians see, that there is a real chance for them to withstand this onslaught by the Russian forces. They will, keep his feet to the fire, and he is also very limited in what he can promise. Ukrainians will not be ready to give up on Crimea, for example. But once again, I think the idea of neutrality is very much a starter. But once again, if you ask me, I do not believe that NATO encirclement, NATO enlargement was ever a serious worry for Vladimir Putin. It is mere window dressing. It's an excuse. Vladimir Putin has been hell-bent on trying to restore the Soviet Union, and Ukraine is a crucial piece in that puzzle that he's trying to assemble. So therefore, I'm very skeptical as to any sort of formula that will, in the immediate future, satisfy Vladimir Putin.
Okay, there's certainly a lot of uncertainties revolve around the future of this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Matthew, as I was speaking to Murat a few minutes ago, Turkey has a very unique position amid this war. It is close both to Russia and Ukraine. But as we are seeing this war unfold, correct me if I'm wrong, we are seeing two blocs emerging. One is the West. The second one is China. Where do you think Turkey stands?
Oh, Turkey is, it's trying to thread the needle, but it clearly stands more with the West than with China. Of course, there are in Turkish national security decision-making and analysis, there's a group of the so-called Eurasianists who have argued for years that Turkey's proper place is not so much with the transatlantic community, but is instead with Russia and China and the East. But I don't see that as a predominant trend at all in Turkish foreign policy. And I think President Erdogan has been pretty clear in where he stands, which is he has consistently condemned the war, the invasion. He has expressed Turkey's support for the territorial integrity of Ukraine, and he's condemned the annexation of Crimea. But he's done it in careful ways, using respectful language that hasn't so irritated President Putin that President Putin would refuse to send his foreign minister to Turkey. On the contrary, I think President Erdogan has found the right formula, which is to be tough with Putin, to show you're not going to be intimidated, i.e., if need be, you shoot down a Russian fighter jet that's violating Turkish airspace, you fight Russia to a standstill in Idlib or in Libya, but at the same time, you show respect. And if you do that, if you're tough and stronger or as strong as a Russian and show respect, then they will listen. And so I hope that President Erdogan will be able to bring those factors to bear. But as Peter was saying a little while ago, for now, Putin is not serious about negotiating. He's using military force as a negotiating tool. Force is one of the many tools of diplomacy because war is the continuation of politics by other means. So for now, what Putin wants to do is run through the motions, window dressing, as Peter said, of these negotiations, while his military forces brutally reshape the politics and the realities on the ground of this conflict.
Okay, Murat. Now, despite efforts by many other leaders, it was President Erdogan who got the foreign ministers of Ukraine and Russia to a negotiating table for the first time since Russia started attacking Ukraine. Do you think it's about time for the West to start following Turkey's formula?
Well, the West has its own style, and Turkey do. The first thing is that, because the West prioritize different things in comparison to Turkey. Because they are in a unity, for instance, under the umbrella of the EU, and sometimes under NATO, because there are some types of disagreements on certain issues. On the other hand, Turkey has learned something from the past experience, mainly in Syria. It's what? Autonomy in decision-making, especially on foreign policy. Because when you try to bind your future to the initiative of the third parties, that means you are a subject. And it's valid also for Russia-Turkish relations. Turkey has challenged Russia militarily in the battlefield and negotiated in the meantime, because this is the new type of diplomacy. So the West played its role even though they are not that much united. And that's why Russia was encouraged to start an attack to Ukraine. Now, Turkey prefers another design in its foreign policy. And the issue right now is to coordinate both the West and Turkey, because what Turkey provided to the West is the gate. Now, Turkey can communicate with Russia, even though there may be some escalations and the West may benefit it. So in this age, I think it's the new design of war, conflict, or peace, or diplomacy. But I'm not sure if it will be beneficial or not, but at least it's a course.
So the idea is there's an opportunity for the West to capitalize on Turkey's unique relationship with both Russia and Ukraine. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today here on the Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. You can follow us on Twitter @_Newsmakers, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Jafar Hasnan. See you next time.